All right. Good morning, everyone. We are going to get started. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. Let me just go ahead and get my webcam going here. We're going to say hello. All right. Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. It's the top of the hour. Today, we're going to review the enhancements to Flare 2020 R2. My name is Jennifer Morse, and I'm the Director of Customer Success here at MadCap Software, and I am so thrilled and excited to also be joined by my colleague, Jorgeo Catolico, Customer Success Manager here at MadCap. So, hey, Gio, thanks for joining today. Going to have some fun. So, just last week, MadCap released a Flare 2020 R2. And in today's session, we're going to review the enhancements in this new release. So I'm going to run through the agenda here in just a moment, but before we do, I just want to review two quick items of business that we like to cover before the start of every webinar. So hopefully my slide will adjust here. So once again, this webinar is going to be recorded, and so if you have to pop out early, not to worry, we're going to send a link to the recording to everybody who's registered. There's also a question panel in the GoToWebinar console that you see. So we would encourage you to use this place to ask questions throughout the webinar. We're going to do our best to get to all of these live, but whatever we don't get to live, we'll send a follow-up question and answer document. So hopefully, this will answer a few questions and spur a few more. So do feel free to drop in the questions there in the GoTo console there. Now, I'm going to put PowerPoint away in just a moment, but I do want to review our agenda today. So in today's agenda, we're going to start by talking about some new list enhancements, including the ability to insert definition lists and some other list enhancements. Then we're going to turn our attention to styles. We're going to talk about some new features for styling micro-content responses and field level / embedded help, and also styled variables. Then we're going to turn our attention to some publishing enhancements, including some new improvements for MadCap Connect for Salesforce, MadCap Connect for Zendesk, and some new options in our target outputs, including this new content to include area in the target file. So we're going to talk about some of those. And then, of course, we're going to have some other enhancements that we talk about as well. So for the rest of the webinar, we wanted to have our cams on just to say hello to everybody and welcome everyone. But because we want to maximize the real estate here in this webinar and also ensure we have the best bandwidth possible for the next hour, we're going to say goodbye for a little bit and turn our webcams off. And then we're going to dive right in. So, all right, so I'm going to put PowerPoint away and I'm going to open up Flare here. All right, so I'm just waiting for GoTo to catch up. There we go. So let's start with definition lists and some of the other list enhancements for this release. So definition lists, also referred to as description lists, you'll sometimes see that if you search for them on the web, they're often used to create groups of terms and definitions together, or maybe an image and a definition of it, or just a plain old text term and a definition of the term. And although Flare has always supported definition lists, in previous versions, you needed to use the internal text editor to code them. So you had to be comfortable going in under the covers a little bit to manage those definition lists. Well, now, Flare provides an option in the UI to quickly create them. So you might, why would you use a definition list? What's the point? And I'm going to show you how to create it in a second, but just a little bit of background. You know, you might choose to use a definition list if you want to describe and maybe display technical terms or interface terms, or maybe tasks with a certain description of the task, for example. The benefit of using a definition list instead of maybe some kind of different markup like headings or regular paragraphs or maybe even tables is that you're providing more context for the content. So by using a definition list, the underlying markup is more semantically rich. So visually, it looks like a defined list of content, or it can even look like a table if you want it to. But since it's more semantically rich, metadata can be more easily associated with that information and can be more easily extracted. Also, definition lists provide more by way of accessibility. So if you have to be mindful of Section 508 or accessibility guidelines, well, then you may choose to use a definition list rather. All right, so let's take a look at how you create them and their constructs in Flare. So I've got Flare open here. I hope you can all see this. Feel free to use that question panel if you can't see my screen, or if you can't hear me, we'll do our best to help you out. So probably should have done a quick technology check there in the beginning, so hopefully you can all hear and see me okay. Anyway, so let's talk about those description or those definition lists first, okay? So here we've got a table of content. Okay, so I've got some information, you know, when this person was inducted, and nothing wrong with using a table, but what I want to do is show you how to make this a definition list instead. So I've made this a little bit bigger so you can see, and we start the definition list the same way we add in any other list. I've got my cursor at the insertion point where I want to start that list, and up on the home ribbon up at the top, we're just going to go ahead and use this insert list option here. And this is new. So again, you don't have to do it in the text editor, but we have the option to just drop in that definition list right here. So watch what happens to my P tag, how everything's going to change. So we can see that we've got some new elements here. We've got the DL, which is the container for the whole list where it's going to live. And then we automatically have what's called a DT, which is the definition term. Okay, so again, didn't have to code it, just going to go ahead and drop it in there for us already. When I hit enter, watch what happens. Let me scroll down so you can see. I've got a new element here called a DD. That's going to be the description or the definition of this term. So I can start typing. Okay. Now, if I hit enter again, I'll get another DD in case I need to add additional information for this description. But if I hit enter again, we're automatically going to get that new DT tag, so I can enter in my second term. We'll do this real quick. And we'll also do BB King. So we can see, we can just keep going here. Let me scroll down so you can see. So those constructs are already added for us. Now, you're not necessarily stuck with this look and feel. This is just the out-of-the-box way that these description or these definition lists look. But because we've got these elements here, and we can style them to look however we want in our style sheet. Okay, so you're not stuck with this sort of plain look and feel. You can certainly change the root styles for the list and the terms and the description, or you can also create style classes. So I actually took a moment to do that. I'm going to show you another example of a definition list that looks very different than this, this standard definition list that I've just inserted. So here's an example. I've got my list. I've got this represents the term. This is the description. So I styled it with classes to make it look like a table. You know, this is just my idea of how I wanted it to look. You can put different borders in there, of course. So even though it kind of looks like a table, it's still a definition list under the hood. All right, so let's talk about some of the other list enhancements that we've added. And I'm going to start with the inclusion of paragraph tags inside all list items by default. So let me switch topics here so we have some context. Now, in previous versions of Flare, by default, all bulleted numbered lists were inserted as what we call simple lists, meaning the OL or the UL only contained an LI tag. So here's an example of that behavior. So here's an unordered list in my list items. So by default, when we would drop it in, it would just be a simple list. Now you could then add paragraph tags within these list items if you wanted, but it was a manual process. You know, you did your shortcut you could drop in a paragraph there if you wanted. So that's still possible. But in this new version, by default, the behavior has changed a little bit. So let me show you. We'll move over to this topic here and we'll play with this a little bit. So in the new version, in 2020 R2, a P tag is automatically going to be inserted inside each LI by default. Now this can be handy if you often add content between list items like images or paragraph or notes. So let's go ahead and try this so you can see. So just a bunch of content here. I'm going to create a quick unordered list. I'll highlight my content. And we always do it the same way up here in the paragraph section within the home ribbon. Okay. And I'm just going to drop in a bulleted list. So here we can see automatically that that P tag is added within the LI. Okay. Now there's a little float icon here. When I hover, or actually when I click on here, we can see that this is the default behavior. Okay, doing a paragraph list is the default behavior. We can, if we want to, change that default behavior to be those simple lists like they were in previous versions. And then we can also here say, hey, by default, every time we drop in a list, I want it to be a simple list. Now, I'm going to come back to this default behavior in a moment, but I did want to point out what this little floating icon means if you wanted to change the behavior when you do this action. But I'm going to come back to that in just a second. Okay, so I've got my list here. Now, if you are I want to mention something, because if you're a longtime Flare user, in addition to this new default behavior, one of the main changes you're going to notice is that by pressing enter at the end of a list item is a little different. So I'm going to hit enter. Notice that I get a new list item with my paragraph tag in there. You know, Flare says, oh, you want to do a new list item. So that's now the default behavior, a little different than in previous versions. So now if you want to add an additional paragraph to that LI, all you have to do is hit backspace, and that additional list item goes away, and now we have an additional paragraph within that list item. So that's a little bit of a muscle memory change for some of the longtime Flare users. So I did want to point that out. So again, the default behavior is to use those P tags when we drop in the list, and then when we hit enter, it's going to start a new list item, but it's just a backspace to get rid of it and start adding in supporting content, okay? A couple other things on list handling that I want to mention. When we drop in, let me go ahead and get rid of this since I'm not going to add anything here. So when we drop in a new list, I'll go ahead and start a new list here. Let me grab these. When we drop in another, I'll go ahead and use another bulleted list just as an example. So we've got a separate bulleted list now. You do have another little float icon here as an option where you can tell Flare, hey, keep it as a separate list. Don't merge it. That's going to be the default behavior. Or you can tell Flare, hey, merge it. So anytime I drop in a consecutive list, I always want you to merge it with the previous. So this is the default, but you can tell Flare to behave a little bit differently if you choose. Okay, so I'll keep it separate for now. There's also the option for merging multiple consecutive lists together. So let me make a third list here just to demonstrate, okay? And I'll come up here and make a new bulleted list. So now I've got 3 unordered lists in my topic, okay? So in previous versions, we could merge lists together, but you had to do the 2 that were next to each other. So it was more or less 2 at a time. But now if I were to highlight all of this content, let me go ahead and highlight all 3 of these lists now. If I right click, I still get that merge list option, but it's going to merge all of them together. So I don't have to do it 2 at a time if I have that situation in my topic. So I'll merge them together. Now we can see we have 1 consecutive unordered list with all of our list items in there. Another option that we've added for list handling as it relates to sorting our lists. Previously, there was 1 sort list option available to us. Let me go ahead and right click and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so here's that sort list option. So in previous versions, we had the option to sort our lists in ascending order. Well, now we have some additional options. We can sort them in descending order. And we can also tell Flare, hey, sort it in ascending or descending order, but do it on build. Okay, so sorting at build may be a useful option if you always want a particular list sorted. Maybe you're in a situation where you've got multiple authors working on that list over time, or maybe you're working on it over time and you forget you're doing some sorting. And you may want to ensure that the last author that's making edits to that list doesn't forget to sort it. So sorting it at build time is going to take care of that action. You're telling Flare, hey, I don't care what order it's in, but when you build, go ahead and sort it in ascending order because that's how I want it to behave. Translation's another reason you might want to consider sorting your lists at build time because languages use different characters. So this ensures that the list in each of your outputs is sorted appropriately based on needs. Now, I mentioned the defaults. I was going to come back to that. So I do want to mention that real quick before we turn our attention to some of the styling enhancements. So in previous versions of Flare, there were certain actions that you did where you had the opportunity to set the default behavior. And you saw that when I dropped in that list, I had the option to change the default behavior just by doing the action. And you can still do that. But in this version, we've got a new option from the file menu, which I'll show you, where you can set up the default behavior ahead of time. Okay, so let me show you where that is. Sorry, I got a little bit of a jerky mouse. Up here from the file menu, down here at the options, wait, go to catch up. Perfect, now you're seeing what I'm seeing. We've got this in the XML editor tab, there's this new default section. So again, if you want to set up your instance of Flare to have certain defaults ahead of time so that you don't have to do it within the action first, you can set up that default behavior right here. So if you always want your lists to be simple and you don't want to have to do the action, you can come into the options list and change it to a simple paragraph here. That will be the default behavior from Flare. Okay. All right, next I want to turn our attention to the styling enhancements that we've made for micro content and also variables. Now I'm going to start with micro content styles. Let me pull up my micro content file here so we can use this as my example. Pull up my project here. So I'm going to start with those micro content styles. Now, I don't have time to go into all the fun things about micro content and how we create and manage it. But, just to give a little bit of context for some of you who may be newer to this concept, or maybe you're not sure about micro content or why you should even care, what it means for you. Micro content's pretty cool. It can do a lot of things. It can improve the search experience for your end users. It can be used as field level or embedded help within applications. We can see micro content feeding chatbots. It can potentially be used in virtual reality or augmented reality applications. I mean, we interact with micro content every day. MadCap didn't invent micro content per se. It's all around us. What we did bring to the table about a year and a half ago with Flare 2019 is a really easy way to create it and manage it in your documentation. But you use it when you talk to your phone and ask for the weather, or maybe you talk to Alexa and say, hey, what's it going to be at 5 o'clock tonight, in terms of the weather. Different queries may give you a directed response. So when we talk about micro content, it's text, images, video, audio, or perhaps a combination of these things that's going to answer a user's query really quickly. It should only take the user about 10 to 30 seconds to consume the information based on the question that they had. Oftentimes we see micro content as think about it as short form bits of content that's often extracted from longer form content. So we see it in Google. So I'll show you this, but again, I like to kind of start with a visual, a little bit of the end in mind here. So let me go over here to Google. So, we all probably did a Google search 5 minutes before this webinar started, okay? And you'll notice if you do a Google search oftentimes, particularly on how to do something or about something, I just did one here, how to, boiling an egg. I mean, look at all these results that I could sift through. But what Google does is they sort of extracted some interesting bits here and put them all the way at the top of the search result. A little bit of text, a little bit of image. If I go to one of these, of course, it's going to link to the longer form procedure. But right on top of those millions of results that I could regularly sift through, I've got some directed bits of content to answer my query quickly. I also got some additional information here. So this is a great example of micro content. Our online help, let's use real world here, documentation. Okay, so if I was searching, maybe I'm a new user to Flare and I search for the word snippet, I get quite a few results that I could sift through, but I also have this interesting bit of content. So right up at the top of our search. So in Flare, what we use micro content for out of the box is for these featured search results to mimic that Google experience. So this is micro content up here. This information was extracted from a longer form topic. We don't need the full long topic. We just want a quick directed answer with some text about a snippet, links to more information. We got this cool little rich video here that shows us, I can take a file, I can drag it into my topic, and I can reuse a chunk of information. That's what a snippet is. Okay, so we're not searching through these things. I got a quick answer. And if I want more, of course, I can click this link here. And this takes us to the longer form topic where all of that information was extracted. That micro content can also get passed through at build time and be embedded into a field level help situation or maybe a phone app, for example. So it's small, little bits of content. You don't necessarily want to link to this whole topic. So micro content can be quite useful. So how does it all happen? Well, in Flare, let me go ahead and bring it back up again. We'll put the examples away. In Flare, it starts with adding a micro content file. So I have my project here. I went ahead and created one for the purposes of this webinar. And in Flare, it starts with phrases that we author that pair to a response. And this whole thing, the whole micro content, it's managed in what we call a micro content file, which I have open. Okay, so here's my micro content file. And when you load it, it looks like this. Okay, so this is how I'm managing it in my project. On the left-hand side, we have our phrases or our queries. And on the right-hand side, we have our response. So we can see I've got a few here. I've got Austin city limits. I have an alternate phrase. And so I've structured this because maybe people search on something in different ways. Somebody may search for the full Austin city limits. Somebody may just search for ACL. And I want to show them this directed response. Okay, this is actually linked to a topic. Okay, so all of this information is coming from a longer form topic. I can't edit it in here. But we do if we want. Again, I'm not going to go into too many details, but I do want to show you what this is. Here's a phrase, Zilker Park. It's not linked to a topic. I just went ahead and authored the response in here. So usually a lot of those responses are coming from your existing content. So linking it to a specific portion of your topic is usually the preferred method so that we can, single source and reuse our information better. But what I want to point out now is that by default, the micro content responses in the output, everything that gets generated, looks the same as our regular topic content. But in this new version, you can use custom styles when content is viewed as micro content, like as a featured search, like we saw with the snippets, or perhaps as field level help, as opposed to how it looks in the full topic. And this can be done by associating a micro content file with a particular style sheet. So using this approach, you can override certain style settings and have the generated content that we build look a little different than how it looks in the source topic. Okay, so I'll show you how we do it. Over here, you'll notice I've got my micro content file. I've also got 2 style sheets here. So the only thing that I've included in this second style sheet, which I called micro content CSS, are the settings for the styles where there should be uniqueness in the featured search result when we see it, or for displaying it as field level help. So what we can do now on this micro content file, I can right click and I can bring up the properties of this micro content file. And we'll see a new style sheet links tab. So this is my project level one, but this has got those certain, just small style overrides that I want to show. Okay, so I'm going to use that. I'm going to link it here. Now I'm move this over so you can see. When my micro content's using the style sheet for some of those overrides that I've got, watch what happens to my response. Okay, so I'll say okay. And we'll see it looks a little bit different. The response content, those paragraphs, they're taking on the different style overrides that I set up in that micro content CSS. Things are a little bit smaller, there's a little bit less spacing. So again, whether it's for featured snippet and search or for embedded help, you may choose to make it look a little bit different. Great for embedded help or field level. You may not have as much real estate as a regular web browser. So if we look at the full topic content, yeah, maybe you want it to be, your standard font size that you're using in the documentation. But if we've got a small little bit of real estate, we still want to reuse that information and make it contextual to the field or the little piece that we're on within the app. But maybe we have to kind of shrink it down a little bit, smaller font, less spacing between the bullets, that kind of thing. So again, the only thing I'm putting in this micro content CSS are the settings where we want to have uniqueness in the featured snippet and search. We don't have to put all of our settings there, just those little bits where we want to make those style overrides. Okay, how would it look in the output? Well, let's bring up my web browser one more time. And here is the generated output for this sample project that I'm working on. If I were to search on Austin city limits, for example, because that was one of my phrases, you can see that my response is taking on that look and feel, okay? But remember I said I extracted it from the topic. So if I want to get more information, here's my link to the topic. Now watch how it's going to look different. So this is that micro content that I've tagged. It's all of this information here, but it looks very different in the search as opposed to how it looks in the source topic, okay? So a little bit more control there. Now, I will mention that in previous versions, you could control that look and feel, and actually you can still do this now using sort of a combination of complex selectors in your style sheet. And you could use a single style sheet if you wanted and get fancy with some advanced styling. But for that approach, I mean, there's some pros and cons. I think one pro to that approach is that you only have one style sheet. But the downside is you have to be really comfortable doing some of those advanced CSS techniques. And the styling that you do is only going to affect the search look and feel. It's not going to affect any kind of micro content that you use for embedded or field level help. So the benefit of using this approach is that it works for both the featured snippets and search like we see here, but also in the generated content when we want to use it for field level or embedded help. And it's a little bit easier. You don't have to use complex selectors and get really fancy with your style sheet. So your choice, totally up to you and how you like to work, but we've given that additional option now. All right, so the next thing I want to review as it relates to styles is the ability now to style our variables. Let's go back to Flare. Okay, so styling variables. Now what's great about this is that when a styled variable is applied to our content, it can be seen in not only the XML editor when we're authoring, but in any generated output type as well. And there are actually two ways to do this and to manage these styled variables. Number one, we can create a style class for the MadCap variable element in our style sheet. And we can apply that class to any of the variables used in our project. You can use generic classes as well and then apply it to the variable. Using this approach means that we can pick the variables that we have used and then apply that specific style. Or we can style specific variables right from the variable set editor, which is a great approach if you want the style of a certain variable to look the same for every instance where it's used in the project. So let's take a look at both approaches so you can see the behavior. First, let's talk about creating that style class for the MadCap variable element in our style sheet. So let's take a look at my style sheet here. And we can see, let's go, I thought I had this filtered, but I'll go ahead and do that here. So there's that MadCap variable element in our style sheet. And I created a style class called brand color. And you can see I've put a few settings on here. I'm making it a certain color, using actually a CSS variable to control the color. And I made it bold. So we can see a little preview of what this is going to look like if we were to use that class. So with the class provided, now if I go into a topic, we'll go ahead and open this one. Here's a topic with a few variables in there. Okay, this is the user guide variable. This is the version. This is actually a system variable that I included. So we know it's a variable because it's got that funky gray background. I can't edit the text. It's actually coming from my variable set in the definition. And so with our variables here, I can say, well, you know what? I wanted to use that style class that I created. So we can do that a couple ways. I can use the style drop down here, or if you're somebody who likes to have your style window open, you can do that as well. But there's that class that I created, and I've applied it to that variable. We can do the same thing here. I'll apply it. Maybe I want this one to take on that look and feel. Maybe I want that system variable to also be that look and feel. So that's one way to do it. It's one class, and we can apply it to the various to different variables in our project. The second approach is maybe we want all variables used in our project to have a certain style. We don't want to have to apply it. And so we can use our variable set editor to create that class. So I'll show you that approach next. Here's my variable set in my project, okay? And we'll play with this one because this product name is used in that topic that I was just showing. In fact, it's used in another one too, so we can see how it behaves. So from here, maybe I want all product name variables to look a certain way, right? I'm using it in a bunch of places, and I just want to go ahead and say, hey, every time we use that product name variable, I want it to be green, for example. We don't want to have to then apply it. So in my variable set editor, I can do two things. I can use this little button here to edit the variable style, or I can right click. I'm kind of a right click kind of gal, so I love the right click menu. And here I have options to do that. So I can edit this style. So I'll choose that option, and my style sheet opens. Okay, and it takes me right to that MadCap variable element, so I don't have to hunt and peck for it. There's that one I created. But here's the one now that's created for me, and I can apply whatever style properties I want. So I'll just do a quick style change here. Let's give it a bright color just so it stands out. I'll make it this green color here, okay? So now everywhere we've used that product name variable, it will be green. So let's go back to our title page. And we can see now that that variable is now green. I didn't have to apply it. I said, hey, we're doing it from that variable set editor. Everywhere we've used that product name, I want you to be green. So 2 ways to do it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and turn the reins over to Geo, because we're going to turn our attention a little bit and we're going to talk about some of the additional publishing enhancements that we've added in Flare 2020 R2. So Geo, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you so you can take it away.
Thank you, Jen. So in this new release, we also added some new features to our MadCap Connect for Salesforce and MadCap Connect for Zendesk plugins that gives additional publishing options for those that publish their topics into these systems. So I've opened up my Zendesk publishing destination. I've opened that up from the destinations folder, and I have MadCap Connect for Zendesk selected here. And for those Zendesk publishers, there is a new option to create subsections. Now, adding subsections in your knowledge base allows you to create more levels in your content hierarchy. If you are using the table of contents to define your structure and have this option enabled, you can now create subsections for your articles when you publish into Zendesk. So I'll show you what this looks like. I'll go ahead and open up my TOC that I use for publishing into Zendesk here. And let me expand these books. And we have a TOC specific for Zendesk because the Flare TOC has a very unique way of mapping into Zendesk when we publish. Now, in previous versions, we were only allowed 3 levels here. The first level, that always became a category. The second level, this always became a section. And below that, on the third level, those always became articles. So if it was on the third or lower levels. But now with the option to create subsections enabled, for those third and those lower level books in our TOC, we can use those to create subsections in Zendesk. So with the way that I have my TOC set up right now in 2020 R2, when I publish this, Texas will still become my category, Austin will be my section, and then these would become articles under my Austin section. But this music book here at the third level, this will actually become a subsection because I have topics underneath it on the fourth level. And then the topics under music will then be articles under my music subsection. Now, if I publish this into Zendesk, and I published this beforehand to save us some time here, but you'll see that I do have my Texas category, and then I have my Austin section, and then I have my music subsection here, which then contains articles under music. Now, we didn't invent subsections for Zendesk, but now we can create them in our TOC to publish into our Zendesk knowledge base. On the MadCap Connect for Salesforce side, I'll open up my Salesforce Publishing destination. We also added some more options to this plugin as well. In addition to being able to choose an article type to publish your articles with, you can now choose a specific rich text field that's associated with that specific article type. So if you have different rich text fields configured in Salesforce for an article type, they will appear here in this dropdown. And then when we select that rich text field, all of your topics will then be published with that rich text field in Salesforce. We also have a new shared asset library field. So to keep track of publishing updates, publish logs are published into Salesforce and used to be saved only into your private library. Now, the drawback with this is that multiple authors couldn't publish into Salesforce and update articles. So there was typically just one designated person to do all the publishing, because once that person published that article, the article was essentially published under that author, and only that author can now publish in that article from Flare moving forward. But now we could publish into a shared asset library. So in case your designated publisher is out, or now if different authors want to publish into Salesforce, this helps multiple authors on a shared Flare project be able to publish and manage those articles. There's also new category mapping options. So before, all the topics had to publish into the categories defined here under the default categories field. So the categories that we selected here, all of our topics would publish using those categories. If you want to publish individual topics to specific categories, you had to do this on different instances with different publishing destinations representing each category, or you had to assign all those categories once you publish in Salesforce. But we changed that a little bit. So you could still publish to all the default categories that you selected here, but now you have the option to be more specific with your category mapping, and you could actually use the TOC to map to matching category names. And this uses the TOC path selected for each topic and places the published article in the closest matching Salesforce category name. So it doesn't have to exactly match, but the names do have to be close. But to use this, the TO structure needs to match the category structure in Salesforce. So let me bring up my TOC that I use to publish into Salesforce here. And I'll expand some of these books. And then I'm also going to bring up a screenshot of those categories that I created in Salesforce, just to help visualize how our TOC does map. So the top level book in our Flare TOC, this must match the Salesforce category group name. So this will map to my category group called Texas. So that needs to be on the first level. The second level book in my TOC will match the top level category, which is states. The third level book will map to my Austin category. And then this topic introduction will be published with that Austin category name. And that famous Austin folks topic, because it matches my famous Austin folk category in Salesforce, that will also map. Next, because my Austin attractions book matches in Salesforce, it will map to my Austin attractions category. And because this music book matches, it will also map and publish to my music category. And then all of my topics below music will publish under that music category in Salesforce. We can also map a single topic to multiple categories when we publish as well. So if you notice here, I have this barbecue topic, and it's under Austin attractions and Dallas attractions. So when we actually publish that topic in Salesforce, it will only appear as one single topic, but it will have both Austin attractions and Dallas attractions as the categories. Going back into my publishing destination, there's also the ability to use the TOC to map to matching category unique names. So this is similar to the previous option, but this actually uses unique names instead of the names for your categories. This is going to be most useful if there are multiple of the same data categories in Salesforce, but they have different unique names. Along with that, there's also the option to remove stale mappings, which will remove other category mappings for the published article if they are no longer a part of the category mapping when they're published again. At the bottom half of our publishing destination, you'll see that we could also customize the URL for the articles published into Salesforce. Now, the default option here was to generate a unique URL. And this was actually the only option that we had previously. And this will enter the topic title, and it will also generate a unique number to the end of it. And as you could notice, this preview window here is also new as well, and just gives you a preview of our URL based on the option that we have here. But now we could customize this a bit. So if I go back into this dropdown, we could actually use context-sensitive help identifiers. And this will take the context-sensitive help identifiers found in our alias file that's associated with the target, and then it will use that as the URL. I'll go back and I'll select topic title with a suffix. And you'll notice that this field pops up next to it. So we could add text here. So I'll put 2020 R2. And then this will use the topic title followed by that suffix that we enter here in the destination file. If we want to move that to the front, we could select topic title with a prefix, and now it's added to the front, followed by a hyphen, and then the topic title. And we could also base this URL off our topic path of the output. So this will use the output folder names, and then we could add that same suffix. Or we could have that topic path with a prefix instead, and then we can move it to the front. Now, one thing to note is that with this suffix and prefix, with these selections here, this field is going to be optional. So if we want to publish with just the topic title or the topic path, we could select either prefix or suffix, and then we could simply leave this field blank to publish with just the topic path or the topic title. At the bottom of our publishing destination, you will also notice that there is a new destination ID section field, which tracks the files published to the shared asset library or the private library in Salesforce. This is especially useful for a team of writers because it ensures that all of the authors can update the same set of articles published from Flare. Once you start setting up a Salesforce destination, you will get that generated destination ID right away. But the times where you would have to generate a new GUID is if you copy this destination to create a new one. So you should have a new destination ID for that new publishing instance. So that's why you would want to generate a new one. In addition to the publishing destination for both the Salesforce and the Zendesk plugins, there are also new clean XHTML target options to provide support for these new features as well. So I'll open up my clean XHTML target, and then I'll go down to the Advanced tab here. And at the bottom, you will notice that there's the option to include CSH ID meta tag. Now this option is required when we use those CSH identifiers to name the URL in the Salesforce Publishing destination. So that's when we have this option enabled here. And when this option is enabled in our target, the targets in the generated output will include the identifiers from the linked alias file as meta tag content. There's include TOC path meta tag. Now this option is required when you use the TOC to map to categories, and this will include the TOC path as meta tag content for the topics published. And I'll show you what these look like in my output. So I've opened one of my output topics in a text editor here, and within the head tags, you'll see that there is a CSH ID metadata, and then we also have the TOC path metadata. And again, this is included in the output so we can publish articles with the URL that we want, and so we could map those TOCs to categories in Salesforce. Lastly, we also added a new content to include option for our online output targets. Now, for those familiar with the Advanced tab of either HTML5 or Clean XHTML targets, there was an option about right here that said exclude content not linked directly or indirectly from the target. But we moved that option a little lower, and we also added a few more to go along with it. So if I hit this drop down next to content to include, we're given a few options, and the first of which is to include all content. So this means that all topics in the project will be built into the output when we publish our online output. And this was the default behavior for online outputs previously. Now, if we don't want to build all of our files for the output, there is the option to include content linked directly or indirectly from the target. And this will essentially only build the topics that are linked in the TOC, plus any additional topics that are not in the TOC, but may be linked via hyperlinks or cross-references. This option was helpful because although the topic may not have been in the TOC, Flare will still add it into the output to make sure that all of those links do work. The new option that we added is this bottom option here, to only build the content linked directly from the TOC. Now, if this is selected, then the target will only build the topics that are in the selected TOC. And this was helpful because you know exactly which topics are going to be in your output, and other topics that may be linked with like a cross-reference or a hyperlink won't actually sneak into the output files. With this new feature, you want to keep note of links because if there is a cross-reference to a topic and that topic is not included in the TOC, then that link will actually be converted into normal text. So you'll see that in the output. But with this option enabled, it does keep the output folder nice and tidy, and it won't populate the output with unwanted topics. We also made some other enhancements to Flare 2020 R2. Flare now adds accessible rich internet application or ARIA attributes to new tables automatically. This helps to make tables more accessible in HTML5 outputs by letting users know where the cursor is located in the table. We also added Flare support for Azure DevOps source control. This enhancement will benefit those using Azure DevOps with TFS integration who also want to use an Azure DevOps URL. Given the update jQuery had, Flare 2020 R2 now supports jQuery 3.5.1 for HTML5, including top nav, side nav, try pane with all the search options, Eclipse help, Web Help Plus, and EPUB. So that covers what's new in Flare 2020 R2. We hope that you all will have a chance to download it and try out all these new features.
Great, thanks, Gio. Yeah, so definitely, if you haven't already downloaded it to test it out, feel free to do so. You can certainly tinker. We'd love to hear your feedback and additional questions that you have as you test, but we do have some questions that have come in, and we're going to get to those here, so keep them coming if you still have them. Do want to remind everybody that Mad World is scheduled for next October, the 3rd through the 6th, in Austin. So if you haven't already registered, I would encourage you to pop up to our website, take a look at the amazing lineup of speakers that we have and all of the great sessions. And we even have some pre-conference workshops as well that you can sign up for. And if you register by December 31st, you do get a sizable discount off your registration. You can save up to $1,000. So if you haven't already registered, we hope to see you there. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So looking forward to seeing everybody who's going to be attending. So pop on up to the site, take a look at the schedule and our speakers, and register if you haven't already. All right, so Gio, great job. We've got some questions that have come in that we want to tackle. So let's do what we can here in our time allotted. And again, please keep them coming. If we don't get to all of them live, we will send a follow-up answer to you. So a question came in when we were talking about the list enhancements, particularly the definition list. The question was, does the definition list inherit the P style if you don't have a style for it? And that's a great question. The definition lists will not inherit from the P style, but they will inherit from the body tag. So if you use paragraph tags under your definition list tags, then those will use your P styles. So I hope that helps, and please let us know if we can clarify any of that. Another great question came in that I'd like to repeat for everybody is for existing lists, right? Because we talked about how the default behavior changed. But what about the existing lists in our project? Will those tags remain as they are, or will they be modified to include that P tag behavior, the new default? And so for your existing lists, those will not be modified at all. Okay, it's only going to be for new lists that you insert that are going to have that P tag in there by default. But again, you can change that behavior when you insert the new list or from that default section from the file menu if you always want them to be a simple list item. So it's not going to affect your other ones, just the new ones you drop in, and then you can always change that behavior. Okay.
Here's another one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is a separate CSS file required for micro content?
Good. Yeah. Good one.
Yeah, so a separate CSS file is actually not required for micro content. If you don't use the separate CSS file, it will just use the styles from the project or for that link topic.
Right, so it's not required, it's just added, it's there if you want to just make certain unique style overrides that are preserved when we build. So if you need to have it look a little bit different than the topic from, from whence it came, as I like to say, you can use this separate CSS to control that. So not a requirement, but it's an additional option for you. It's a good question. Here's a good question. If you set a style on a variable, can you overwrite it? Absolutely. You can do those style overrides in your style sheet that you've applied. So if you applied a certain style class to a variable and you change it in your style sheet, it's going to update everywhere where it's used. That's a great question. Another interesting question, do the new description list constructs, the DL, the DT, the DD styles, do they have any relationship or connection to Flare glossary styles? And actually, they're two separate things. The new definition list styles and the way they look when we insert them into our topic, they have no relation at all to the Flare glossary file. So they're two totally separate things. All right, so let's keep going here. We've got some new questions.
Here's another one. Is there a sort on build for tables? So Flare provides the ability to sort at build for tables. And it also includes advanced features to select the order of which columns to sort first.
Oh, sorry, I lost audio there. Can you repeat that, Gio? Sorry.
What's that question here? Is there a sort on build for tables? So yeah,
Yeah.
Flare does provide the ability to sort at build for tables, and there's also options to select the order of which columns to sort first.
Cool. Yeah, and so that's something that you can certainly play with. That's something Flare has had for some time. You can play with that sorting table behavior certainly now. Here's an interesting question. Are definition lists responsive? To be honest, I'm not exactly sure. I suspect they are. I don't know if you've tested that, Geo. That may be one where we have to test and kind of do a lookup for you and get back to you. But that's a really good question. And I'll be honest, I'm not sure. I suspect they are. It's not something I've actually tested, though, so I don't want to say for sure, but we can certainly get back. That's a really good question. Thanks for asking that. Let's take a look at some of the other questions that have come in. We're getting some more and trying to look at some of the duplicate ones that a lot of folks have been asking. So another question came in, why would you choose a definition list over a regular list? What are the benefits? Well, again, when we use a definition list, again, under the hood, they kind of look like lists, or they can look like lists. But again, the big benefit is that the markup under the hood is more semantically rich. So you're giving that content more context. The other thing I wanted to mention, which I totally forgot, another benefit to using a definition list. In fact, let me go ahead and let's see if I think I have some time. I'm going to go ahead and take presenter rights. I apologize. I did want to point this out. Let me see if I can do this here. I'm going to make myself presenter. All right, so let's go back to my example here where I've got this definition list. So another benefit too, it relates to snippets. So, I've got this table of information here. And really, I mean, it kind of pertains to tables when you're displaying content like this is, I could make a whole snippet out of this table if I wanted to, no problem. But what if I needed to create a snippet just out of this row of content because I needed to use it again? Well, you can't. But you can, if you had your content styled to kind of look like a table, you can actually make snippets out of your terms and your definitions. So that's the other benefit to using a description or a definition list. So for example, if I needed to reuse just this bit of content somewhere else or in another list, definition list, for example, with that selected, I can just create a snippet right out of that content. I'll just call it BB King just for fun. Now we can see that that's been wrapped in that snippet block. So that whole information is coming from a snippet. We lost that construct that we saw. But if we take a look at that snippet file, I'll go ahead and open up. There's that snippet I just created. So if I open this up, we can see it's still keeping its construct there. So it's still that definition term in the description under the hood. And now we can use this snippet of information anywhere we want. So that's the other benefit. Also, because of that context, it's better for accessibility. So if you have to be mindful of Section 508 or the WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, definition lists are a bit better in that sense. So if that's something that you have to be mindful of, you may want to think about using those to describe terms or UI elements. Okay. That was a great question. I hope that helped.
Here's another one. So if I link topics in Flare and publish them all to Zendesk, but then I want to only republish topics directly linked from the TOC, are those links converted to text? And when you publish, yes, those links to topics not in the TOC will then be converted to text since you do publish with that option.
Great. All right. Okay. So let's keep going here. I think I'm seeing I'm trying to look for some other good questions here that are sort of, I'm not sure we'll be able to get to all of these live, so please keep them coming. Again, as I mentioned, we're going to do a follow-up document for everybody. Let me see if I can find some that have been asked a couple times. It sounds like that's what people want to see. Let's see. I think we got to a lot of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So another kind of, just to kind of relate, there was another question sort of about, definition lists and metadata. And again, just to kind of go back to that, by using the definition list markup, under the hood, if you were to look at it, and it's more semantically rich. So if we need to extract content, any metadata that we're embedding in that content, it's easily extractable. So what we're going to do for a little bit more information on that one, there's a couple articles that I found that I researched as I was learning about this, and we'll be sure to include that in the question and answer document for everybody. So, all right, well, Gio, we're coming upon the end of the hour here. Thanks so much for your time and for doing this with me. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I also want to thank our audience. Thanks so much for joining today. And we certainly appreciate you taking the time. Again, if you haven't already downloaded the trial, please do so. Keep in touch with us. If you continue to have questions as you tinker and you test, we'd love to help you out. We hope you can take advantage of some of these new features. We'd love to hear what you think of them. Please drop us a line, let us know. We'd love to hear it. And again, if you haven't already registered for MadWorld, we hope you'll do so. Great opportunity to network with fellow users, come to the support lounge, get your project-specific questions, that wonderful over-the-shoulder help sitting next to somebody. It's a fantastic event. So for those of you who are new and haven't been, I would encourage you to join. So thanks, everybody. We so appreciate you taking the time with us today. We hope you have a wonderful rest of the week, and we hope to see you on a future webinar. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.